to stroll in. I check my LinkedIn page. So what happens now is on LinkedIn, it pings everyone that has requested to be notified or that is in my or that follows Materials Exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not. Come on. Here we go. So far, we have none. Three. We're up to 4.
All right.
So do you have a big weekend planned?
Well, I'll tell you, I used to have a radio show on SiriusXM for a couple of years.
Oh yeah.
Years ago. It's called The Lazy Environmentalist, and we were live every day for 1 year, and we did not have a ton of call-ins to our show. We were kind of high up on the channel sphere, but occasionally we would, which would be exciting. So I know this feeling of waiting. Like,
But we actually get more people that view the show afterwards.
sure, of course.
Not everybody can break free at noon every
Right.
day.
Well, right. If it is noon for them.
All
But
right.
yeah, I have a big weekend planned. Going to see some 11-year-old soccer games tomorrow. I'll be an
Oh,
11-year-old basketball game. It's going to be epic.
nice.
Yeah.
Well, I get to clean out my garage and put stuff into storage.
Oh,
That,
congrats, man.
that'll be
Where,
so
where,
fun.
where do you live, Mike?
I live right in Chicago, about say 2 miles west of Wrigley Field,
Ah, wow.
six miles from the office.
Gotcha. Are you a lifer, a Chicago native?
It's feeling like it. It's been 25 years now, but I grew up in Wisconsin, so I'm definitely identify a little more as a cheesehead.
Okay. As a Packer fan or just generally as a cheesehead?
Well, always a Packers fan, but
Yeah.
I went to Wisconsin as well, so kind of a cheesehead as well.
Oh, gotcha. Cool.
Yes.
Cool.
All right, well let's kick this off. Hello, everyone. It's Friday, and that means it's time for the Smart Market call, and we have a great one today. I'm so excited about it because we're going into the holiday weekend, and we are going to load you up with some excellent talking points for your Thanksgiving dinner. Um, with us is Josh Dorfman, the CEO of Planted, and we're going to get to him in just a minute. But my partner in crime, normally Ashley Buckholt, is out today, so I'm going to cover what's happening in the market real quick. We have a very interesting market on our hands here. On Monday, the lumber futures contract for November expired, and it expired kind of weak. Then Tuesday, January contract right out of the gates showed a lot of strength, and it went limit up on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It touched limit up today. It's been a pretty wild ride. That's a very large move at any time in lumber. We had one of our busiest, I think our busiest day ever at Materials Exchange on Wednesday, and the interesting takeaway that we had, or that I had from the transactions, were no one was really curious or worried about getting the product the next day. This seems like it is a market move that has people covering business that they have coming up in that first quarter. So, take that for what it's worth. But no one needed the wood right away. But as the market moves higher, it seems as though maybe they were covering some business that they've already had sold. So that's what we're seeing in the market. Feeling strong kind of across the board. If there was one laggard, I would say it would have been OSB. Ironically, we're having a little bit of a topic here is OSB. But yeah, OSB definitely did not have the strength across the board that we saw lumber and, both Southern Yellow Pine and spruce. So with that, I am going to kick off my conversation here with Josh Dorfman. And Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be here.
All right. So the question is, wait, why are you here, and why are you on a show about lumber and building materials? So tell us
Yeah,
what is planted? What's this? What's going on?
yeah, thank you. So, planted, we see an opportunity around alternative biomass to trees. We think that there's as we move into the 21st century, the opportunity to make building materials, structural building materials, using biomass like hemp or bamboo, giant miscanthus grass alternatives. We think the time has come. So what we are doing is we're building materials and we are reimagining essentially the assembly line to make building materials, taking a lot of cost out of it, making it more nimble, potentially more distributed to unlock this opportunity. And when you start to look at the strength gains of hemp versus trees, and turn that into a board or a stud, we know that we know that all the literature says that fiber in a hemp plant or bamboo is going to be stronger than wood. We're starting to prove that out in our prototypes, and we're just really excited about this future that we're stepping into.
All right. You said the magic word for us in this lumber and building materials business, which was fiber. So you started out saying we're looking at biomass, and I think it's important to clarify trees are biomass. Lumber is actually biomass, as are many other materials, such as hemp. Number one. What were some of the other materials you've referring to?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned bamboo. There's been people have been excited about bamboo for some time. It's had its kind of, you know, it had its sort of cultural moment a number of years ago. People got excited about it, but it was hard to figure out the manufacturing to realize the promise of bamboo. It's a very kind of labor intensive process to make boards or products out of bamboo the way it's done today. I mentioned something called giant miscanthus grass, which is similar to bamboo in that it's a perennial, meaning it will, once it's in the ground, it will grow every year very fast, very tall, very thick, without needing to be fertilized, without needing really any inputs to make it grow. So the reason why we get excited about these so let's just say alternative kinds of plants, trees are a plant too, as much as trees are biomass, right? But why we get excited about these alternative kinds of plants is because they grow so much faster than trees. And because they grow so much faster and because they are so much stronger in their fiber, it creates an opportunity. So this is the big thing that we're thinking a lot about is carbon capture. So can you create a system to grow different, alternative, again, we're talking about biomass, alternative plants, let's say, that because they grow so fast and they grow and can be harvested every year, there's an opportunity for them to capture so much more carbon as they're growing, thinking about a climate change solution. And because they are stronger, there's an opportunity to do some different things on the innovation side to build what we would consider better building materials that are zero learning curve for builders, not alternative building techniques, but things like OSB, things like studs, things like joists. That's really how we're trying to tackle the market.
So, what is the problem here? Because I know what it is, but I want to hear it from you, and I'm curious as to how you came about the angle into the market that you have. So, what do you see as the number one problem you're solving?
Yeah, well, I guess we would look at it and say the team came together thinking about a climate change solution. So I had a furniture company here where I'm based in Western North Carolina, headquartered in Asheville, and I was making furniture using a premium plywood, FSC certified, trying to do things as green and sustainable as we could. Domestic manufacturing, sustainable materials, best resins we could find, everything, and really trying to shrink that supply chain. But what I was finding on the material side, especially over the last couple of years, certainly through COVID, from sheet to sheet, board to board, the quality of that material was declining to a degree where it was becoming unusable. And we were losing a lot of money in that factory. And it just started me thinking like, man, if we had an alternative material to this plywood, something different than trees, I think there's a really interesting opportunity there. And as I was thinking about that, I met my co-founder, one of my co-founders here at Planted, who came from SpaceX, right, working on the environmental controls and life support systems for the Dragon cargo and crew spacecraft. So first keeping mice alive, then keeping humans alive going into space. And at SpaceX, they build all their components, they build all their materials, and they build all the factories to build their components materials in-house. And so this was a team that had this certain skill set, and they'd been thinking a lot about carbon capture and what could you grow, what alternative, a different biomass than trees that could grow so fast to plant hundreds of, let's call it millions of acres to take so much carbon out of the atmosphere. When we put these two ideas together, and we said if we can come up with a better material that could also have this carbon capture story and solve some things for manufacturers and for builders, maybe there's a real opportunity there. And then the more we dug in with builders and we said, look, we can build anything that's made in a factory out of wood. Our starting point is going to be hemp, and I can get into why, Mike, if you want, like why we're starting there. But what should we go build? Well, immediately you start saying, well, it's going to be OSB because that's the most widely used engineered material in home construction today. And so then we started saying with builders, well, what's the problem with OSB? What can we solve? What could we do better? And most of home building today is happening in the South. A lot of it's happening here in the Southeast where we happen to be headquartered. And when you go talk to builders and they say, there's some innovation starting to happen around products that respond to heat and humidity, wind-driven rain, more moisture. And there's some really good products in the market, but not a ton of products. And builders want to see more. They want to see things that reflect kind of what it's like for them to build on a job site. So we just said, look, come be part of our development process. Come into our prototype shop in Durham. Come work with us. We're starting from zero. We want to be as responsive to builders as we can possibly be in what we go build and design. And so that's how we're going about it. We think we can build a better product at the same price that has these sustainability, climate change benefits baked into it, and give builders something that they're going to want and that their customers are going to want.
So this is funny. It's not rocket science, but you're solving it with rocket scientists.
Yeah, very well said. It's not rocket science. It's the kind of idea where when you talk to, the average person on the street, they'll be like, yeah, like, why isn't that being done already? Right. So, well, the trick is part of the reason why it's not being done already is because OSB mills, just as, one product, when you go build an OSB mill from scratch, you're talking about a $400 million plus factory to get those economies of scale. And so as a new entrant coming in as a startup, you actually need a team from SpaceX to bring the same learning that they brought to beating Boeing and other huge corporations into space, right? By figuring out how do you take cost out of the system? How do you redesign things and just think in an entirely different way of engineering? And so we're bringing that to our process. So instead of saying we're going to go build a $400 million OSB mill or production line, we're saying we're going to go build a $1 million production line that we can probably put in a number of different places, potentially much closer to where that biomass, right, those alternative plants are being grown, take cost out of the supply chain, but still ramp up how much we can produce off that $1 million line so that we can be incredibly competitive out of the gate and really be, potentially rethink what this industry over the long term looks like. Of course, that's our aspiration. We're not shy, or short of ambition, but that's how we start to think about things.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is expensive to start an OSB mill, and it takes a large entity and a ton of planning. And it's not surprising that they're using trees right now. And one of the reasons hemp, of course, you told me this yesterday, is just now on the radar is because it's now legal. So what?
That's right.
Shed some light on that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to delve too much into the kind of even murky history of why hemp was legal or illegal in the U.S. for a long time. But in 2018, December 2018, the U.S. government at the federal level passed a farm bill that legalized hemp everywhere. So there had been some state trials, or trials happening at state level in some places around the U.S., North Carolina being one of those places going back to 2014. But once it was legalized in 2018, then farmers started looking and saying, okay, well, what's the opportunity? And, state by state, you can see how many farmers are registered to grow hemp. So in North Carolina, you have about 1,500 farmers. The interest is extremely high. And part of what's exciting to farmers is that the inputs, so let me say, so just quick background on hemp, there's kind of two different plants that are hemp plants. One is you would grow for the flower, which is CBD, all those CBD products. That's a smaller plant. That fiber is not quite as strong because all the energy goes into the flower. And then the other plant is called industrial hemp, or growing for the fiber. And that can get to 15 to 20 feet tall in 90 to 100 days. That's what we're talking about. And the fiber hemp has very similar economics in terms of inputs for the farmer as wheat, soy, corn, other commodity crops. So it's doable and it's understandable, but it's actually more profitable to the farmer to farm hemp than those commodity crops. And so that's how you get over some resistance to actually getting farmers to say, yeah, I think this could be an upside opportunity for me. And you actually need it to be more profitable to get them to switch. And they can also farm it with the same mechanized farming equipment that they have today. So it's not a heavy lift to build that supply chain, which is why farmers like it, which is why it's our starting point. The other thing.
Okay, so I get it, which is great. We can grow this hemp product. Why does that matter? So why, we're looking at some OSB on the screen here. Why are we having a discussion about hemp and OSB?
Sure. So we think about, we think a lot about climate change, and we know that buildings, even if they're made out of wood, there's still what's called, what's now referred to as embodied carbon in that building, right? So to make all those building materials and bring them into that building, there's a carbon cost, right? Because just you're creating, you're manufacturing, there's pollution, there's, all the inputs in a supply chain. And so a lot of people are starting to look at this and say, how do we reduce that carbon impact of the construction sector? Wood is pretty good, right? Wood is better than steel and concrete. And there are some applications on the commercial side. There's something called mass timber, trying to build skyscrapers or high rises out of wood.
Correct.
Right? Trending around the world. Eventually it's going to come to the US, we think, in a significant way. So we're not saying wood's terrible, but what we're saying is hemp or these other plants, in terms of their ability to grow so much faster, creates a much better opportunity to pull carbon out of the atmosphere to do it faster. So it's a way to harness this industry as a real solution for climate change that trees simply can't do. You can't plant enough trees. There's not enough land mass in America to plant enough trees to get to what everyone's striving for, which is called gigaton scale, right? Taking a massive amount of, there's just simply not enough land mass to do it, because a tree plantation will sequester about 2.5 tons of carbon per year per acre. So 2.5 tons per carbon per year per acre versus if you're growing, say, hemp, we've already seen where you can push that to about 15 tons of carbon taken out of the atmosphere per acre. So it's just a vast difference. It's just a smarter way to do it. The trick is to figure out the economics of it, which we think we have a good handle on. But once you can figure it out, you take more carbon out of the atmosphere, you can build a stronger product. You can engineer that product to have incredible moisture resistance characteristics. It's already better on bugs because of some of the chemistry in the stock itself. So there's a lot of opportunity if you can figure out. Again, the trick is, because we're talking about OSB, it all comes down to the economics of making sure that you have a price competitive product, and that's why we feel like having a team from SpaceX to go build the kind of factory we're going to build gives us a fighting chance.
So in the prototypes you built so far, what is the difference in look and feel, functionality from straight up OSB made out of southern yellow pine, loblolly pine, wood, fiber, and the hemp fiberboard?
I think it's really, the similarities are probably more telling even than the differences. I mean, whether you're going to screw it or nail into it, it's exactly the same. The way that you would use it is exactly the same. What we find that's exciting is that, when we're doing our 3-point bend testing, and so we're seeing, with hemp, you're actually pushing like 4 times the strength of wood OSB. So, that strength to weight ratio can create some things that may be, interesting to a builder. You could have a roofing product, same strength, lighter, right? You could have a wall sheathing, same weight, stronger. You could have stiffer, less squeaky subflooring. You could, have wider spans, wider span rating. I mean, there's some things that there could potentially be upside on OSB itself. The moisture characteristics, of course, we know that's becoming increasingly important. So what we're seeing is that the product tests well, but really builders put it in their hands. They're like, this looks like OSB, this feels like OSB. And we're like, that's exactly the point. Like, there's zero learning curve to actually go adopt a product. And in a moment when builders are feeling a little bit frustrated with what's gone on with the timber supply, particularly around panels, we have an opportunity to get builders' attention.
So if you take wood OSB and hemp OSB side by side, the main difference between the two is the actual fiber, but the resin is the same. You're putting it together with the same chemicals.
By and large, the resin's the same. I mean, so we are using an isocyanate, PMDI, which means it's premium resin, very strong. All the formaldehyde's been reacted out of it by the time it gets to our shop. No one's wearing a mask in our shop. That's our starting point. There are some potential things we can do to optimize our formula that would be different than what you would do with wood, but that's simply how we're optimizing for durability, for moisture, some of the characteristics we're going for. But by and large, yeah, it's a very similar type of resin application.
That's so cool. Now let's just talk a little bit about how you're manufacturing it versus, you touched on it a little bit, but this was something that really struck me. You're building this line, and as opposed to being a press where you compress, you gave me the number, it was a massive number, many sheets into one. It's a continuous, almost like making spaghetti or pasta. Is that correct?
Almost. It's not quite an extruding process, but it is a rolling process. And so, a typical OSB mill, has a machine that was developed basically about 50 years ago, which is this massive 8 stories tall, 4 million pound press. It can press a lot of OSB at once, a giant sheet. But because that machine is so tall and it's just so massive, that's the scale that everything in that OSB mill is sized around. There's basically 2 companies in the world that build that machine, Diefenbacher and Simpelkamp. They're both in Germany. So the engineers all come from Germany. So our competitors, the way this industry works today, they don't build the machines, they import them, they import the engineers, they get the thing set up. We're building everything ourselves. We're probably we'll be the only OSB mill that actually builds the assembly line ourselves, because we're entirely re-engineering it. So what ours would look like, it would be 4 feet wide, 200 feet long. It would fit very easily into like an empty Amazon warehouse where, let's talk about hemp hay would essentially come in one side. It looks like hay. It would feed into our machine. And then 3 minutes later, out would roll a finished 4 foot by 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet, however, whatever dimension length OSB board. The cool thing about the technology is then right next to it, we could build another one of these production lines, 4 feet wide, 200 feet long. But if we tune the machine a little differently, rather than spitting out an OSB thickness, we could tune it to spit out 1 3/4 inches, and now we're into studs. Right now we've got LSLs, and we can do that in the same factory. We can put these factories, because they're so much smaller, right in the markets where the demand is greatest for building materials. And because hemp or bamboo or miscanthus can grow everywhere or in many places around the US, we can actually locate our source of again, coming back to biomass supply, we put our factory very close to that supply and put all of that very close to the end customer, and completely rethink the supply chain.
That is so cool. I love that idea. One of the big carbon polluters is moving product from its manufacture point to its product, or where it's going to be used. So being able to, get things closer, that totally makes sense. So, and I like the idea of the different products. We have seen, mass timber, obviously, and we're seeing some of that LVL, those really thick, OSB type materials, which perform super well. When can we expect to see this product? Like, it's we're coming into the end of 2021. So when might we Materials Exchange have some hemp OSB on the platform?
So we are right now in the process of designing and engineering every component of this production line I mentioned to you, this automated line. Our team's actually out in the prototype shop right now, working on all the components. So we'll finish up the engineering and analysis. We'll finish up all of our design work, kind of midwinter or later this winter, 2022. And then it'll take us about 12 months to complete the building of the first automated production line. it'll be a commercial ready line once it comes out, but it'll be 2023, probably about mid-year 2023 when we start bringing our OSB to market and getting it up on your platform and being very excited about all of that.
All right, excellent. Um, well, we're coming up on some time constraint here, so I always finish up with one last question, and it's what does Josh see in the future that other people may not? Like what's your vision going right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to the more we dig into this business and in recognizing that we started thinking, we met as a co-founding team in February. We incorporated Planted in May. We've been out to the hemp fields. We've talked with builders. We have our investors now lined up, and the more this whole thing starts to come together, we really think, if you think about the built environment we have today, the world that we have today, the skyscrapers, what everything looks like, it's all, it comes from steel reinforced concrete, right? Like and if you look at like the 20th century, the most iconic building built that way was the Empire State Building. But the thing is, like, it's incredible. Like, we've had so many gifts from the environment, from the built world we have today, the built environment. It's brought us out of imbalance with the planet in terms of how many emissions come from it. So thinking about climate change. But when you think about what enabled the Empire State Building, it was really U.S. steel, right? It was the way that this company figured out how to manufacture this equipment at scale, at the right cost, where it could then become the material of choice, and we experience the world the way we know it today. We really believe that what we would consider not, we mentioned mass timber, building high rises out of timber. We think the future is mass biomass. We think there's almost a march of inevitability that we can go that way, solve climate change, build better buildings, stronger, lighter, cheaper. But to do that, you'll need a new factory form. And Planted is that factory form, and that's the role that we hope to achieve. And so we see a world where buildings are made out of plants. Recognize trees, of course, are plants too, but alternative kinds of plants. And that's a delightful world that enables us to thrive as we move forward into the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I've been in wood and lumber my whole life. I do love lumber. Don't get me wrong, much better than steel at this moment. But I think it's important for challenges to always happen to a product. And OSB is a perfect example. When it first hit the market, no one would use it because that flake board is going to fall apart. In this last market move we had, OSB became more expensive than plywood. And I'm sure there was a time when plywood came out and said, "Oh, I'm never going to use that. That stuff, it's too thin, and the glue's going to fall apart." So it's important we always challenge the status quo, because number one, it might make the status quo better, but number two, you find a better product, a better solution. So kudos to you for bringing this to or working on bringing this to market. I love it. I've really enjoyed learning more about your product, and we're looking for good things to come.
Well, I would just say, kudos to you as well. I love the innovation that you guys are bringing to the market, and I appreciate what your thoughts around Planted and the opportunity today. So yeah, thank you for giving us an opportunity to chat and talk about what we're doing. I appreciate it.
All right, excellent. All right, all smart marketers, we're going to be off next Friday, so we'll see you all in 2 weeks. And you know what, Josh? I think we'll check in with you in a year or so, see what's going on.
Awesome.
We'll keep tabs. If you want to find out more about Planted, it's Planted, PLANTD, materials.com. Josh is on LinkedIn, of course. So connect up with him on LinkedIn. It's Josh Dorfman, Dorfman. So with that, we're going to sign off. Everyone, have a great weekend and enjoy your holiday.